No, it's your time is precious, and I appreciate the fact that you guys are investing in your own children and their future. So today we're gonna be going really deep. We're gonna take a really deep dive. We're gonna look at reading in general, and then we're gonna talk about read alouds and reading to your children, and doing more than just reading to them, but trying to engage them in a way that is meaningful. So let's get started. We'll begin with just reading. Let's start like with this anchor idea of what exactly is reading. And if you were here for the first workshop, the goal is we're trying to get kids not only to read the words, but to understand what they're reading, the reading comprehension. So let me just let everyone in. Okay. So reading comprehension is the goal. And to get there, there are two things that we look at. Decoding, which is, it's knowing the sounds for the letters and then putting those sounds together and reading the word. So reading the word through decoding, and then language comprehension. And that's the knowledge of what the words actually are. So it's a really pretty simple formula right here. We have word recognition and language comprehension, and those two things come together and you get reading. So what does this formula actually mean? Now, if we look at word recognition, it's specifically, does the reader or the child have phonics knowledge to decode or sound out the word? For example, transistor. If a child looks at that word, do they have the knowledge, that phonics knowledge, to sound it out? The T means the T, the R means the R, the A means the A, N, S, I, S, T. And then, most importantly, probably the trickiest part of this word is that the OR isn't two sounds, it's one sound, it's just And when you put it all together, what we call blending, you'll get transistor, right? So that's an example of word recognition, the decoding aspect. What's the language comprehension portion? That's if the reader can, if the reader can decode or recognize a word, does the reader, the child, have the knowledge to make sense of the word? It's one thing to be able to read transistor. It's another thing to put it in context, to know what it means. So when the child or the student is reading it, are they saying to themselves, okay, this word, I know it has something to do with electronics, or maybe I've seen this word mentioned with computers. My computer has millions of transistors in the processor. A transistor is a tiny computer part. Now, it depends on the knowledge of the child, what they've been exposed to, what they know about computers, what they know about computer parts. These are some of the things that occur when a child is reading. They see the word and they have to be able to understand what it means. So that's where reading comes in. Reading this formula, it's both. You have to see the words and understand the words. All right, so we were talking about this formula: word recognition, language comprehension. And if you look at this, we call this the reading rope. Down here in orange, this is the word recognition portion. This is like your kindergarten, first, second, and to some degree, third grade students. They're learning how to read, just how to read words. They're learning basic letter sounds. They're learning all the phonics concepts. They're improving their phonemic awareness. These things develop early on. This up here, the kind of greenish turquoise, that's the language comprehension portion. And that takes a long time, because to build knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge, that doesn't happen even within 2, 3, 4 years. That takes a very, very long time. In fact, even adults, we're still continuing to accrue this knowledge base of background knowledge, vocabulary, so on and so forth. Okay. So again, this down here is happening usually in kindergarten, first, second, third grade. If you are a non-native English speaker, this is something that new language students are learning as well. But this up here is something that takes years and years of time. So again, the word recognition, that is, can you actually read the words? And then the language comprehension is, do those words have any meaning to you? So the last time, in our first workshop, we talked about phonological awareness, the sounds, being able to distinguish the sounds, hear the sounds. Today, we're going to jump to the other side of this rope. We're going to talk about background knowledge, vocabulary, and verbal reasoning, oral language, okay? So let's try this experiment. We're talking about language comprehension, not, phonics and being able to read the words. We're talking about knowledge. So you can follow along. I'll read this and let's see, if you can follow along and see what you know. Having crumbled to 214 all out, with Jonathan Trott's 84 not out, the glue across an otherwise brittle English innings, the tourists were back in the contest when Paul Collingwood's brace had the hosts wobbling at 100 for 5 at the turn of the 21st over. So that's one. And then here's another example. The 3-4 defense incorporates 3 defensive linemen, 2 defensive ends, and 1 nose tackle, who line up opposite the other team's offensive line. Those 3 players are responsible for engaging the other team's offensive line, allowing the 4 linebackers to either rush the quarterback or drop back into coverage, depending on the situation. While the role of the defensive lineman is fairly consistent, the linebackers allow for the flexibility and versatility of the 3-4 scheme and give defensive coaches nearly limitless options to confuse the other team's players and coaches. Depending on the situation, any number of linebackers can blitz, fake a blitz, spy the quarterback or running back, or cover receivers. In key situations, a rush linebacker may be sent to cover the flat on the opposite side of the blitzing defensive back. This is called a zone blitz. So I think to most people, we can read this. We can say the words. But there are a lot of people who cannot make any sense of this unless you have very specific background knowledge about what we're reading here. So let's take a look at this. These are all terms, we can call them vocabulary terms, that you may or may not know. This first little quote right up here, does anyone know what that's even about? Anybody? It is an analysis of cricket. If anyone knows anything about cricket. Now,
I thought it was about football.
well, the second one is, but not the first
okay.
one. So the first one, all outs, turn, the 21st overs. I had no idea what this is about. But if you talk to a 12-year-old cricket fan in India, they probably could understand everything. In this second one, I think someone mentioned this is about football. It is. It's about the defensive schemes in football. But if you don't know anything about football, then it's going to be difficult. And even if you know something about football, if you don't know what blitzes are, spies, covering the flat, defensive lines, defensive ends, coverage, receivers, these are all terms that only mean anything if there is some sort of context of background knowledge or general knowledge. So if you can imagine, reading is not just about the words. It's about, or getting the words out. It's about understanding and the vocabulary and the background knowledge. It is so, so important. Also, here's another example, inferences. Inferences, like being able to figure something out that's not specifically or explicitly mentioned, requires knowledge, background knowledge. So let's look at this example. This is from I think probably Little House on the Prairie or something. And it's just an excerpt. And we can read this together. So, but why? Asked Laura. Why are we going to town at night? It's a surprise, said Ma. Now, no more questions. We must all take baths and be our very nicest. In the middle of the week, Ma brought in the washtub and heated water for Mary's bath, then again for Laura's bath, and again for Carrie's. So you see how in the middle of the week, I highlighted that. That's supposed to be really, really important. Like the reader is supposed to see that in the middle of the week and infer, kind of make that mental leap that, wow, this is a really big deal. But for a person that has no context, no understanding of the time period, it's very difficult to make inferences or understand what's actually happening here. So all we know is that they're going somewhere at night, and the mom is preparing a bath in the middle of the week. But if I give the student or the child some background knowledge, it makes a little more sense. So let's look at some things that might make this a little clearer. All right, so this takes place in the 1800s. So families only bathed once a week, and usually only on Saturday night, so that they can go to church Sunday morning. Okay, so once a week, only on Saturday nights. Getting water from a well, starting a fire, dumping it into a tub, and heating it up takes a lot of effort. Okay, and then adding more water, reheating for three children in the middle of the week was a lot of effort. So for, in this case, when it says in the middle of the week, with background knowledge, you can make a more clearer inference that, okay, this is a really big deal. Without that background knowledge, it means almost nothing. Okay, so this kind of just shows how important the knowledge, the background knowledge, is to reading. So this is just a quote as we segue. Even the best phonics skills program will not transform a child into a strong reader if the child has limited knowledge of the language, impoverished vocabulary, and little knowledge of key subjects. So they need language, they need vocab, and they need knowledge. So how do we get this? How do we build this knowledge for our young children? Well, we know that there is a very, very strong correlation between a child's vocabulary and the reading comprehension. And for our preschoolers, kindergartners, first, second graders, even third graders, or even our young ones, maybe early 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, they can't read fluently, right? So we can't expect them to be learning a lot from their reading because what they can read is so limited. So a lot of their oral language experiences are their primary means for accumulating vocabulary. And one of the main differences between students entering kindergarten, or entering preschool for the first time, is their vocabulary exposure difference between families. The breadth, how many words, the types of words, and the context. There have been studies about what they call the vocabulary gap between incoming students into schools. And there are major gaps between students who have been exposed to a lot of oral language and haven't. And it does affect their reading comprehension to some degree. So these words, the words that you speak to your children, the words that they're listening to, the words that they're engaging with actually matter. It really, really does matter. So I'm just kind of build this chart. We start with a foundation at home that we make the assumption that there's a safe, loving, nurturing environment, sense of security, strong relationships. This social emotional foundation um, is really important. I can't stress this enough that if your children aren't feeling safe at home, they don't have this kind of sense of security or a strong relationship, it makes learning in general difficult. Right, there we go. And then from there, they start learning knowledge. You know, we're talking about science, social studies, math, ELA, the arts, music. So they're going to learn a lot of this stuff in school. And they might learn some of it at home too. And when they're learning all these things, they're going to learn it from real life experiences, whether or not they are going to visit museums, going on field trips, taking trips somewhere, going to places with mom and dad, with their grandpa, grandma, aunts and uncles. They're just kind of soaking it in, right? They're also learning things from television and media, what they're watching on TV, what they're watching on the computer, on the phone, on YouTube, whatever. They're also learning their own language, that kind of linguistic comprehension, from conversations at home and also from books. So all this kind of sparks curiosity. If they're consistent, if they're creating and also consuming, what they end up building this knowledge, this bank of things to go back to. So general and background knowledge, vocabulary, verbal reasoning, and all this is part of this, what we spoke about in those early slides: background knowledge, vocab, verbal reasoning. Okay, so this is where we're working with. And you may be thinking like, all right, so why can't we just build this language comprehension, this knowledge through TV, YouTube, and apps? You can, actually. You can learn a lot from media and videos. I mean, I bet you might have noticed if your child has been watching a TV show, a particular TV show, lots of episodes, they start saying things from that show, or they start mimicking things that they hear on TV. Yes, but they're not going to get everything they need. And if you look carefully on the right-hand side of this, this is a study that was done about the vocab that they found in different types of mediums. And if you pay very close attention to this, okay, rare words, there are certain words that are rare, that are less spoken or less heard of in television as compared to books. So if you look over here, and prime time adult TV shows, there are 22.7 rare words per 1,000 words. But if you look at a children's book, it's almost 31 words per 1,000. Adult books, 52. And as you get higher and higher, there are more and more rare words. So, you know, you can get some things from television, but you're not going to get everything. Remember we talked about that vocab, the breadth, you know, how much vocab, how many things are they being exposed to? Books actually matter. So your kids, they can't read if they're really young. Your 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, they might be able to read a little bit, but they're not going to be able to teach themselves and expose themselves to that many words. So that's why, especially for younger kids, the read aloud is so important. Reading to your kids is very, very important because they can't read for themselves all the words that they need to be listening to. So today, we're finally getting to the 3 practical techniques that you can do to help your children develop language comprehension. All right. Technique 1. When you are reading, during the read aloud, ask open-ended questions. Okay. So we're going to look at an example here, but let's kind of look at the procedure first. So we're going to ask open-ended questions that don't require 1 or 2 word answers because we're trying to build that oral language, right? We're trying to build oral language. So yes, no, maybe, those 1 and 2 word answers, they're not as helpful. So we want open-ended questions. If a child gets stuck with that 1 or 2 word answer, you can take their answer and rephrase it, or you can use their answer to ask a follow-up question. You may have to prompt the student to listen to the question and reread the section of the passage or the book once more. So let's take a look at this. Let's try an example. So we're going to listen to maybe like 20 seconds from a book, and let's see if we can figure out an open-ended question. Okay.
Julius, the Baby of the World by Kevin Hanks. Before Julius was born, Lily was the best big sister in the world. She gave him things, she told him secrets, and she sang lullabies to him every night. After Julius was born, it was a whole different story. Lily took her things back. She pinched his tail. She yelled insulting things into his crib. "I'm the queen," said Lily, "and I hate Julius."
Okay. So let's it's a pretty simple story. Lily, before the baby was born, was happy. Then the new baby comes and she's not. She's mean to her little brother. Now, if you're reading this to your child, what could be an open-ended question from this? And I have some examples here. Let's see if these are any good. Is Lily being nice? Well, let's imagine if we asked our 5-year-old that question, what would they say? Is Lily being nice? Do you think you're going to get a 1-word answer, or are you going to get something deeper? You're probably going to get a 1-word answer. So that's not such a great question, right? Is Lily being nice? No. I mean, that's the answer. No, she's not. Okay. Let's try. How about this one? Who does Lily hate? Who does Lily hate? Is that going to be, it's not going to be a yes or no answer, but are we going to get a more than a 1 or 2 word answer? Probably not, right? What does the mom sing every night? Again, it's probably only going to be a 1 or 2 word answer. How about this one? Why does Lily insult Julius? Can you answer that question in 1 word or 2 words? No. You have to, you have to say some sort of explanation. So out of the 4, this last one probably is a better open-ended question. It just prompts the student to, or the child, to have to think about that and explain it in at least 1 sentence. Now, if they can't get it, you can maybe rephrase your question, or you could reread a section of the passage that probably shows them, oh, this will be an example of why Lily insults Julius. Okay, so one, ask open-ended questions during the read aloud. Now, you don't have to do it every single page, but when you're reading, it will come to you like, oh, this is a really obvious place to talk about this, okay? So that's the first technique. Second, choose 2 to 4, depending on the age, or how your child is with picking up words. 2 to 4 sophisticated words to teach after the story has been read. So sophisticated, I'll explain what that means here, what we really mean by sophisticated. And after the story has been read, don't try to explain, try to teach a word right in the middle of the story, because it's going to take up too much time and they may forget what the story is about. Okay. So 2 to 4 sophisticated words. What is a sophisticated word? It's any unfamiliar word. So a word that's unfamiliar to the child, that can be conceptually understood by the child through explanation or identified with. So, it's a new word that can actually be understood by the child. So you may not be able to choose every single word, because there might be words, even if you try to explain to them, it's like right over their heads. So certain words that they don't know, that you can teach them. And here's the procedure for this. So we're going to choose 2 to 4 sophisticated words after the reading. We're going to discuss the vocabulary we're going to explain that vocabulary within the story's context. And that's also a good place to kind of pronounce the word, enunciate it, and use a little, if you were here for that first workshop, phonemic awareness. If they're old enough, you could even spell it. And then you're going to provide some examples of that word outside of the story's context. And then you can ask a question to the students to have them show you how they would use it in a different kind of context. And then now that that word has been taught, you might want to try to incorporate that randomly throughout the day or the week. Okay, so here's an example of that.
Lily's parents were more than a bit doubtful about leaving the two alone together. Lily had tried to frighten Julius with her nifty disguises. She learned magic and tried to make him disappear, and when that didn't work, she simply pretended that he didn't exist. Lily spent more time than usual in the uncooperative chair.
All right, so in this text right here, there may be a couple of words, let's say that you finish the book and you want to go back and you're like, all right, yeah, I remember there were 1 or 2 words that from this page. There are a couple of different words that you could teach, maybe a disguise, maybe disappear, right? It could be uncooperative, all right? So if we were to take the word, for example, uncooperative, that's kind of a long word, right? But we're going to say, let's pick that word, uncooperative, and let's go back here. And let's go through the procedure. So uncooperative. Let's first discuss the vocab within the story's context. So I'm going to pronounce it, and I'm going to say, all right, can you say uncooperative? And they would say it, they would try their best, at least. Uncooperative. If they were old enough, you could try some phonemic awareness. All right, what's the first sound in uncooperative? Right? Or you could break it up and say, all right, tell me all the sounds. Uncooperative is kind of long, so that may not work there. And you could spell it, okay? And you would explain, what does uncooperative mean? Uncooperative means when you're not wanting to help someone or not doing what you were asked to do. And I think that's a word I think that a child could identify with. all right, especially if they have siblings. Um, so that might be how you explain that, not helping, not wanting to help, not being helpful, not playing nice. All right. And then number two, provide examples within other contexts. So then you would say, maybe, remember that time when you didn't want to share this toy with your sister or your brother? Well, that's kind of being uncooperative. Or when daddy told you to finish your food and you threw it on the floor, that's being uncooperative. So you're not just explaining it within the context of the story, you explain it in other contexts. And then you ask the child to see if they could figure it out. So you may say, all right, so what do you think an example of uncooperative? When have you been uncooperative? Or do you remember seeing something that was uncooperative? And they may say something mean about their brother and sister or something like that. And, throughout the week, you would try to use that when they're getting in the car and they're not putting on their seatbelt or they're being fussy. Hey, you're being kind of uncooperative. Let's try to do it like this. So, you're trying to find words that they probably would never ever use, never know about, but they can understand it. And you're trying to teach them that. All right. So that's number two. Technique three. And this is one I think that it's really easy to do, but a lot of people don't do. So technique three is read first, then show the pictures or illustrations after. And the reasoning behind this is that children often get distracted by the pictures. And when they're distracted by the pictures, they fixate on them. And they don't attend to the story sometimes. And sometimes they don't attend to the reader or what the reader is saying or the characters or, a whole bunch of things because they're staring at the one weird thing in the illustration. And these illustrations sometimes are so interesting, but a lot of times they're just distracting. And it's not that we don't want to show them illustrations. It's that we want them to be listening first and then show them the illustration. So by showing them the pictures afterward, it gives the students an opportunity to both attend to the language, the words, the vocabulary, the background knowledge that we said was so important, and then the visuals, and they make that connection. Oh, when she said that, it was frigid outside, frigid, I had no idea what frigid means, but I'm looking at the picture and frigid probably has something to do with cold. All right. So the procedure, very simple. Verbally read the text from the pages. If you want to do your open-ended questions, you do that. And then show and discuss the pictures after the reading. So I know this is kind of harsh, but again, you see here the teacher reading and showing at the same time. So it'll be interesting to see how many of the kids are actually listening or how many of the kids are just looking at the picture. So in summary, reading to our kids helps build background knowledge, vocabulary, oral language, which are all really important to the development of reading comprehension, right? We're just trying to get kids to know as much as they can store in their brains. This way, when they do read something, they can say, oh, yeah, I remember this word. I know what this word means. I know what that word means. I've seen this word somewhere. And they can hang what they're reading on the knowledge that they already have. TVs and videos are okay sometimes, but not enough. Because remember we said there are words in books that are never, ever, ever used in TV and videos. So when we're reading, we have the three techniques. One, ask open-ended questions during reading, which promotes dialogue and oral language. Choose and explain 2 to 4 new words after reading. If you can't think of 2, just one, even one new word, right? And read the pages first, then show the pictures and illustrations afterwards. Try to do this consistently and as a routine. And again, just to show what we're working on here, the whole grand scheme of things is to get our kids here, this rope. We want that rope to be tightly woven, where they're reading fluently and understanding what they're reading. So today, we're working on this side of the rope: background knowledge, vocabulary, verbal reasoning. And that is it. Okay, so I will take some questions if anyone has any questions. It's 6:37. All right, yeah, so we're doing okay on time. Stop presenting.